Hi, everyone. I'm Sam Eckmann of Gold Derby here with Shawna Trpcic, costume designer for The Mandalorian and Emmy nominee this year. Congratulations on your recent Emmy nomination, Shawna. Um, One of the things I really love about this particular season of The Mandalorian is that it really pulls back even more about the culture of the Mandalorians and shows how these people interact as a covert together. How did you approach that with so many different types of Mandalorian armor? How do you paint a picture of that community and that culture?
Well, the way we started was the division of the culture, really, because there's the mercenary type Mandalorians, which is Bo-Katan's group, and then there's the covert, which is more of the family, but they've been through battles, they're war torn, they have pieces from clones, they have pieces from that have been remade, and then you have your survivors, which is a whole nother group that we'll meet later in the series that are more ragtag. They're survivors, literally. Their stuff in the religious sense is made out of leathers and found objects to emulate the culture that they once were. So once we sort of separated those three distinct groups of Mandalorians, then it was finding the individuality within those groups. And we did that with the coverts by different paint jobs and different battle scoring. So those, just like even in any kind of tribal group, there's the warrior, there's the leaders, there's the family ones, there's the caregivers. And so I tried to find that separation within those groups.
You're talking about different items, things they picked up along the way through wars. Did you feel like you had to kind of go back and become a Star Wars historian? Where do you go for all of that?
Oh, absolutely. No, I'm not as good as my assistant costume designer Alyssa and even Maria Sandoval, the hair lady, hairstylist, hair designer. Really, I study every day and I read every single book ever published on Star Wars, especially the ones that interviewed George Lucas specifically, where he was talking to his designers, he was talking to his concept artists. That's the words that I want. I want those foundational words. And then I go off what John is saying and what Dave is saying, because Dave is a historian, without a doubt. He's a savant, I swear. He's amazing. His plethora of information. So I tap into the books, I study every day, but then I also talk to my leaders, my creative leaders.
Yeah. Well, you have a great opportunity for this. Star Wars, we're always introducing new worlds, new planets, and you're nominated for the episode Guns for Hire, which we get to go to a brand new planet we haven't seen before. And it's kind of it's like a fantasy realm, but in a sci-fi world. And I would love to know how you landed on that aesthetic for everyone.
Well, that was the leadership of Bryce Dallas Howard and John Favreau. Their direction was Alice in Wonderland. This was sort of tapping into that sort of childlike part of Star Wars that we all loved. The funny little animals that would pop up and like eat an insect or something. It's that sort of joyous little comedy relief, but it had a very serious undertone. And so I wanted to capture that. I wanted to catch the royalty, the regality, and then the suspense. The running through the crowds after the droid and the battle droid, and just there's so much history in that episode with the battle droids and with the clones, and it brings up the whole Clone Wars and all the trauma from that. So there's a lot of very serious layered issues that you're dealing with in this episode, that bringing in the lightheartedness of the sort of Alice in Wonderland aspect, I think was genius, because it helps us process the kind of horror of the Clone Wars within that, when they have to meet these reprogrammed clone droids.
Yeah. Well, and you're building, again, another culture, a whole history, as you say. Is there a lot that you create that you dream up in your sketchbook, maybe that gets left on the cutting room floor? How much actually makes it on screen versus not?
Well, honestly, because we work so fast, because it's more of a TV schedule than a film schedule, pretty much everything we create makes it on screen because we don't have time for frugality. I mean, not frugality, frivolousness.
Right.
Honestly, everything we create has to get on screen. So we design with almost a surgical point of view where we're very precise in our purchases because again, limited budget television, limited time. And so every decision I make has to be a very surgical one where you're cutting away the froth, you're getting right to the point. You have the constant education, the constant reading, the constant exposure to Star Wars and to the universe that you want to create. My assistant costume designer and I create boards so that the whole team is seeing with my eyes what the world I want to create. And those are of course approved by John and Dave and Bryce or whatever directors that working for that episode. That particular episode was Bryce. And so then we as a group create this world together. And honestly, I would say very little ends up on the cutting room floor as far as my design and creative aspect.
Yeah. And it's very striking because I think, just looking at Jack Black and Lizzo's characters, they're in blue and gold, and she has sort of shimmery fabric on, and we don't often see that much color in Star Wars clothing. So what was the process like of picking out those materials?
Well, we've already established the New Republic, which is that brighter blue. So you have the Empire, and now the New Republic is the sort of the next step of the Empire, the peaceful version of the Empire is supposed to be. And they're already established blue. And Jack Black's character is in the amnesty program. He was redeemed by Lizzo. And so for me, having the two of them in New Republic blue was a good starting point. It's also very Cinderella. It's very Alice in Wonderland. It taps into a lot of subconscious joy that, that childhood storybook. But it also, for me, was historical within the universe that we're creating. It's a New Republic blue. It establishes the new world, the new community, a peaceful, joyous one, and a safe one. It's supposed to be safe.
Yeah. And I know, Star Wars superfans will always dive into the lore behind every little piece, like the little insignia squares, and they'll know what those all mean. And Jack Black has some. He has a lot of details on his costume. Do you go to that level of detail of thinking about what is the backstory behind each piece?
Every single piece. I've been involved with the cosplay community since my days in Firefly. And so I've been going to Comic-Con for 20 years. And I have a very deep love and appreciation for all cosplayers. And stepping into the Star Wars world was like the treasure chest of cosplay because I know how much they love every detail. And that, I don't know, it inspires myself and all the fans that I work with because most of my crew are great fans of the universe, of the galaxy. So, on Ahsoka's, I'll add a little stitch that only those who are really paying close attention will find. And it's the same with Jack Black. So the pin is the amnesty program pin that was designed by Doug Chang and Josh Props. And so it's very important to us that we show that he was former Imperial. And so that button tells you that story immediately. The gold chain across here, that was established by Count Dooku in a million years ago. So that's the magistrate chain. And then I wanted to add a military chain because I just wanted to pour all the frosting on the cake because he could carry it off.
It's like a walking history book
Yeah,
on him a little bit. And Lizzo her character has this like floating headdress digitally behind her. Did you have a hand in helping design that with visual effects? What was that process?
So that's not digital, that is practical.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, we made that. John wanted this idea of almost like a halo behind her, a glowing halo. And I'm trying to keep everything within the realm of our time period, which is being created between 1977 and 1983, 84, when the original trilogy was created. So I like to do things old school, not a ton of visual effects and not a ton of 3D printing. It's all very practical. So I drew something very sort of watercolory behind her to say, John, something like this. And he's like, yes. So then we created out of sort of this translucent silks and organzas, and then we stitched around them on wire and formed these sort of almost like leave live fire shapes behind her. And then my crew beaded them and layered them up. They did an amazing job. Well, then how is it going to follow around her? Because I wanted it to be a droid. I wanted a droid to do it. The piece itself was a droid. So Joan Lee, one of my set costumers, dressed in all gray so they could erase her digitally. And she followed Lizzo around pushing this halo behind her. And then visual effects lit it up to make it very Disney.
Wow. Well, that, clearly fooled me into thinking there was some sort of droid or something pushing it along.
That's amazing.
So success there. And I love that this show, they bring in a lot of characters, from other places, legacy characters. What is it like when you have to handle someone like Bo-Katan, who exists in the animated realm, but then you have to translate that character, her costume, into live action?
Yeah, that is a very heavy, very joyous burden to bear, because what an honor, what an amazing honor to be tasked with bringing a character to live action that so many people already love, that is a legacy character. And then getting to do it on the actress that did the voice was just like, what? And so I worked very closely with Katie to make sure that she had the movement and was comfortable in the costume. And then with my builders, Jose Fernandez, it was very important to me that we stayed loyal to the animation. And some of the early concept art was getting very masculine looking. It was flattening the chest like a Mandalorian. It was broadening her shoulders. It was bulking her up too much in my mind. And so I went back to the animation, which is a very, very feminine figure. So she's 100% feminine, 100% warrior. And I love that Dave Filoni honors the power of the feminine. So I checked with Katie. She was 100% on board with me creating the very similar images that were in the animation. And so I worked with my sculptors to sculpt a very authentic chest plate and, hip pads and everything that would bring her into the feminine. And reducing the size of the jetpack, because body to jetpack ratio, I didn't need a giant jetpack on a smaller figure. And because of the time, John and Dave didn't get to see her before she worked. And so she walked out onto the soundstage, and everybody's heart was kind of like, this could go really well or really bad. But Katie inhabited the costume, the character, and the way she held herself was just glorious. And I'm like, we got this. And they loved it. We knocked it out of the ballpark. And I'm very, very grateful to Katie for helping me bring this character to life, for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because there's sort of a back and forth. You mentioned Cosplayers before, which obviously is a whole universe of people who take it very seriously and make your designs live on. But then there's, a character you create who may go on into a different television series or movie, or like Din Djarin is a walk-around character in Disneyland at Galaxy's Edge now. What is it like seeing, your designs and costumes live in different spaces like that?
Well, so we have Din Djarin, we have Boba Fett, and we have Fennec walking around Disneyland now.
Oh, I forgot about Fennec. Yeah,
think there might be more. So it was Disney brought the costume to the studio when we were shooting, so that Doug Chang and Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau and myself and Josh Props could all be a part, and Maria here could all be a part of realizing these characters to be walk around characters, because there's certain things you have to simplify because they have to fit different types of bodies, and they have to be out in the heat, or they have to be running around on a Disney ship. There's different things that we have to allow for, but some things you don't want to compromise on, because people would get it. The cosplayers will get it instantly. So Disney Parks is incredible. They recreated the fabrics. They took our notes on character and stitching and the character of the fabric. And then with Din Djarin's paint job, it was slightly off. And I said, we have the formula, just use our formula straight. And they're like, thank you, and we gave them our books with all the swatches in it so they could match the textures. And they were just really grateful that we were so willing to pass this on. But it's important to us. We're fans too. And I want the characters walking around Disney parks to be as close to the original as possible so that cosplayers can enjoy them.
Yeah. Well, you have, beyond Star Wars, you have a lot of fantasy and sci-fi under your belt. You have 3 Emmy nominations from the Star Wars universe now, and you have many past, genre credits to your name. What is it about this type of storytelling that continually draws you in and speaks to you?
Well, I think with sci-fi and fantasy, you get to start from zero. There, in period film, which I also really love doing, but in period film, you have a very strict blueprint, because if it's the 1970s, it has to be the 1970s. You can't do anything from the 80s or 90s or fantasy. It's this. What I enjoy about Star Wars, although I live within the boundaries of my time period, the prequel, I mean the original trilogies, I have total freedom within that genre. I find the challenge of creating something from nothing incredible. I love creating worlds. I love it when we go to a new planet. I love establishing a caste system within the planet, the workers, the government, the whatever, the bosses. I love creating a believable society on each planet. On Navarro, it's more, everybody's very equal, but then you have the high magistrate, and you have those in authority to keeping the peace, and then you have those that are working in a cafe or a boutique, and then you have the band members up on the bandstand. I love creating the textures. For Navarro, I used New Orleans as my inspiration to create sort of the different members of society, to create that ebb and flow, and I love that challenge.
Well, it's fascinating work and wonderful to see on screen. So congratulations, Shawna, on your Emmy nomination this year. And everyone who's watching, make sure you subscribe to Gold Derby and stick with us throughout the rest of this season. And Shawna, thank you once again.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.